Welcome to another episode of Empowering People, Empowering Prosthetics. This is episode 7. My name is Bob Radocy.
I'm Debi Latour.
And we're here to wade through a whole bunch of things about tips and strategies and tricks of using a prosthesis. We both have different backgrounds. Debi was born with a hand absence. I have an acquired hand absence due to a trauma when I was a young man. So that's our general background, but Debi's a professional
Occupational therapy practitioner. So a lot of the methods that I use in this particular episode and session, I'll be sharing with you from the perspective of being a consumer and somebody who lives this, but also someone who has an occupational therapy frame of reference.
And for myself, I'm a consumer as well, but I'm a designer and inventor, so I've been involved with prosthetic component development for probably close to 40 years. So we bring different kind of skills to the table here, and we're hoping that we can share some information with you to make you a better consumer of prosthetics. And that's really sort of what our aim is to make sure that you have the right kind of information. So that you can navigate that sea of prosthetics out there and ultimately get the best outcome for yourself.
To help you engage in a community of people who are like you. It's actually pretty rare for most of the people with whom we work, who are persons with upper limb absence, to actually see somebody like themselves in the course of a day. So to be able to connect with people and learn about strategies and how other people are successful in their lives can also help you. So it's about empowerment. We call this project Empowerment. It's kind of our pet name for it. But we want to empower you with ability and with the goal, the aim of a beneficial and strong, positive quality of life.
We're hoping that these episodes, this series, is reaching not only consumers, but a broader range of health professionals, family, friends, whatever it might be, to empower you with knowledge as well, so that you can help with that, maybe an individual's rehabilitation experience.
Absolutely. So let's get moving with this. This is actually the 7th and last of our planned activities. We hope that you will look at all of them, and we certainly hope that you'll give us feedback and even ideas for more. I think we already have a few brewing, but we look at this as a work in progress, and really the start, right? The first day of the rest of our lives with a new project. In past sessions, we've talked about bimanual activities in which we engage on a regular basis in our lives. The first of these are, from an OT perspective, there's something that we call basic activities of daily living, and they're primarily oriented towards self-care. So on these slides, I've made a list of some of the most common activities that people want to be able to do. We may not talk about every single one of them, but the tasks that you see and the sequences that you see will give you ideas to build on and apply to many other tasks.
What we're going to show you are things you're definitely going to encounter in your life.
Oh, absolutely. So these include basic skills that might include grooming, like being able to brush your teeth, putting toothpaste on a toothbrush, feeding yourself, including cutting food with a fork and knife, pouring a beverage, and even buttering your own bread. Dressing, we talk a little bit about managing fasteners, especially tying shoes, zippers.
You have meal preparation, things, handling ADL includes a wide variety of things.
Yeah, some of those more instrumental activities that are beyond the self. So that's when we get into meal preparation and everything involved with cooking a meal or preparing a meal. It's not always cooking.
How you open things up and close things, how do you deal with containers in different shapes, glasses, how you deal with different types of utensils and tools.
Strategies to wash and dry dishes, right? That's a biggie. Being able to manage different kinds of food, including peeling, cutting, chopping, and cracking an egg. That's a big one. We also talk about home management a little bit. So folding your laundry and changing the liner in your trash receptacle. Being able to sweep, that can be an awkward activity.
You take for common, in some cases take a little bit of practice, and we're going to try to illustrate to you techniques that allow you to maybe accomplish those better with a prosthesis.
Some of the other activities include actually using handheld tools like a hammer, screwdriver, or a drill. using scissors. Even scissors can be kind of complex at times, and threading a needle. I wonder how many people really sew anymore. I don't know. And then we talk about community skills too. So pushing a grocery cart. Have you ever tried to push a grocery cart with one hand? Crash. You go in circles, or you crash into something and down goes the display, and you quickly move away with your head down because you don't want anybody to know. But often when we're at the grocery store, we also have to manage our wallet in public, and that can make us feel a little vulnerable. So we're going to talk to you about some good tricks to manage your wallet and extract your cards or your currency.
Cell phones, computer keyboards, handling phones, all these things. Basic, maybe folding paper, handling paper, and stationery folding and inserting envelope.
Many of us also need to manage our own health and wellness, and that includes being able to open and close different kinds of pill bottles or containers that are related to topical ointments or a host of things, as well as caring for our personal devices. So our prosthetic devices, managing them, even doing some quick small repairs, but keeping them clean.
Absolutely.
A lot of people do not clean their sockets.
Yeah, we just, I wear and wash my prosthesis on a daily basis, much like I wash my hands, because you're out in the environment and you're exposing it to varieties of things, and you want to keep it clean so that you can help maintain your own health and the health of your family.
Absolutely, and that includes the inner parts, but also the terminal parts, because there's such a thing as social function. And what do we do with our hands, right? We embrace each other, we shake hands, we're constantly touching people. And as a therapist, I don't want to have some dirty prosthesis and have someone shy away from me touching them or helping them because it looks dirty. So that social engagement piece is also something that it tends to be bimanual, and then engaging in recreation and leisure. You're kind of the kingpin of that.
Well, all the things we enjoy doing outside of our vocation, maybe outside of our family experiences, whatever you might enjoy. Maybe you play golf, or you swim, or you want to play baseball, you want to play hockey, you want to go out and hike, you want to go skiing. The plethora of activities that are available to us in our leisure environment.
We've picked out a few activities, and in each of these next sets of slides, you're going to see me exempling the activity first with a voluntary closing device and then with a voluntary opening device. Some of the strategies might appear to be similar, but they're actually enacted in slightly different ways. The first one is just simply putting toothpaste on a toothbrush. I usually have my materials laid out on my countertop, and that includes having my prosthesis on and ready, and I put the toothbrush in the prosthesis. For some people, squeezing, removing the cap and taking off, removing the cap and squeezing the toothpaste to apply it is a little more difficult, so using a pump action toothpaste might be a little easier. Sometimes materials slide on the surface, so we can use devices like Dicem or even a damp face cloth on the countertop to help us to keep things stabilized.
Yeah.
Yep.
Increase the friction so things don't slide around. Most bathrooms are slick, hard surfaces. Countertops, they're quartz, or they're in a number of different hard type laminate materials.
Absolutely. And then sometimes people have trouble actually holding the toothbrush in their terminal device at the onset, initially until they get used to it. So they might do something like put a piece of pipe insulation or Coban around the handle of the toothbrush to be able to give a little bit of friction.
Give it a little bit more compliant surface to grasp onto.
Exactly.
A little more
Or
easily.
even make it bigger.
Make it bigger in diameter.
So those are just some tricks that you could use to help complete this task. I have the toothbrush in my prosthesis, and I typically rest it so that web space of my terminal device, I rest the toothbrush handle on that, and then I grasp the toothpaste with my left hand, my intact hand, and I apply it to the toothbrush. I put the toothpaste down, I switch hands, and I brush my teeth with my intact hand. In the next one, that's when I complete the task with voluntary opening. I actually put the toothpaste in my prosthesis, and I open the tube with my hand, holding onto it. I place the cap on the mat, and then I switch hands and I place the toothbrush in the hook with my hand. All right, and the way I do that with a split hook is the split hook has a little bit of a thumb sticking up from it, and I use that to help leverage the toothbrush while I'm applying the toothpaste. So let's talk about buttering bread with a voluntary closing device. I again set up my materials by placing my plate on a non-skid mat because I don't want it to move around. I typically hold the butter knife in my hand because I have more strength and ability in my intact hand. I dip the knife into that softened butter, and I'm stabilizing the bread with my prosthesis on the plate. Some tips and tricks I use for that are those same assistive devices like the Dysum or the Coban, tubing or a mat. And I may alter my positioning. So sometimes when I'm preparing my toast, I might be standing at the countertop or sitting at a countertop on a higher stool. So just making sure that if I'm altering my positioning, that I'm always doing it in a way that is more advantageous from an ergonomic perspective. So I'm trying not to reach overhead too much, and I'm trying not to reach too low. I don't typically stand at a table per se. I might stand at the counter because it's a little higher. Let's look at the difference with a voluntary opening device. So in this one, it's actually pretty similar. I'm putting my plate on that non-skid mat. I've got the bread on the plate, and I've got my room temperature butter. That's really the key for me with any kind of spreadables, room temperature. I tend to, again, hold the butter knife in my hand and go through that same process. The way I stabilize the bread or the plate with a voluntary opening device is a little different though. With my voluntary closing device, I can manage my strength and how much force I need, how much pressure I need to apply to stabilize that. I can also use this area, kind of like the back digit area, to stabilize the butter without pinching it if I don't have to. Now the hook has a similar contour to it, and I can try to do that. But oftentimes I feel like I need to actually stabilize it. So I have to work a little harder to actually hold the plate or hold the bread down. Yeah, and do it without squishing it and pinching it to death. One of the tricks with a split hook is to wedge it all the way in as far as the elastic bands and try to keep it in that open position so that I'm supporting it enough without squeezing it. So the next activity is cutting food with a fork and knife, and that's something almost everyone wants to be able to do. I should point out that with many of these tasks with a voluntary closing, using the Sherlock device on your prosthesis is incredibly helpful because it helps to save your energy while you're trying to maintain your grasp on the utensil. So I use the fork to stabilize the food. I usually have it with my Sherlock on so that it remains closed. I use the fork to pierce the food, and then I hold the knife in my hand to cut. I can use either a rocking or a sliding action. Now, some of my tricks are, first of all, make sure your knife is sharp. A sharp knife makes all the difference in the world. That's number one. Number two, using a rocking or sliding action is very ergonomic because you're actually helping to support and keep the plate from moving while you're doing that. And another trick is to lace the knife between the tines of the fork because that also helps to stabilize things and keep your plate from moving around. With a voluntary opening device, I use a similar technique, but I hold the fork a little differently in that device because it has different contours. And in the video, you'll see that I'm positioning the fork in a way so that I'm using that thumb piece from the voluntary opening hook to leverage my positioning on the fork. And again, I use those same techniques, sharp knife and lacing the knife between the tines of the fork because it just helps to stabilize everything. And it also makes some nice clean cuts. So if I'm cutting food, maybe for one of my grandchildren or a young child, it makes smaller pieces because the tines of the fork are so much closer together. Slicing and chopping is another meal preparation activity that most of us engage in. So I set up my materials on that non-skid mat, and anything that I might need to use, sharp knife, all my materials I have at the ready. I use a terminal device or to hold my pick. So there are these items called a food pick, and they look like Afro hair picks is what they look like. Only they're metal, and they're made for food. I think that places like Sur La Table and Pampered Chef, some of those kinds of places actually have them in their catalogs. But you can use that to stabilize the food. And they've got the top of the pick is usually wooden with a little indentation.
So, gives you an ability to grasp it easier.
Exactly. And you can even use some of that pipe insulation on the top of it to help give you a little more friction or foam to work into, especially with the hook, because I found with the hook that things would tend to slide out a little easier because I can't manage my strength, right? I'm dependent on those elastic bands. But using a pick or a fork in the same way I described previously, that will help to stabilize the food. And then I use the cutting tool in my intact hand and use that rocking or rolling kind of action. Now, some great alternative knives to use when you're preparing food. Believe it or not, a pizza knife, those rolling pizza knives, those are incredibly sharp and are great for cutting and preparing different kinds of fruits and vegetables and foods. And of course, there are things like the rocker knives and things like that. So let's move on to the next activity, which is pouring a beverage. Using the voluntary closing device, I will often use that mat underneath the glass to help support it or keep it from moving. I may passively support the glass or cup. It really depends on the size, and it depends on which voluntary closing device I'm wearing. So with this one, I can hold a small juice glass easily,
but not so much a bigger tumbler.
But not so much a larger tumbler. I can also support a mug with this, just by supporting it at the handle. But I tend to use the Grip 5 if I'm using a larger grasp because it's got a larger aperture. I can also just stabilize it by having it supported on the counter, on a mat, and then just resting my prosthesis on top, on the rim, just to keep it from moving or sliding. And then I'll just pour the liquid in the glass by holding the pitcher in my left hand.
But primarily you're doing the pouring with your sound hand and using the prosthesis for stabilizing.
Right, because the container might be an odd size, it's gonna weigh more, right? And I'm up in space. So it just seems to be a more ergonomic and effective way of
I agree, and that's the way
material.
I primarily pour as well.
Mm-hmm. With voluntary opening, it's a little different because I'm always afraid that the glass is going to slide out of the tines of the split hook. So I tend to have it set, the glass or the mug on the surface. I don't tend to pick it up when I'm pouring. I'm more apt to pick it up with a voluntary closing. But with the voluntary opening, I keep it on the mat and I just pour that way. And I usually just rest the hook on the top rim
To stabilize the rim.
stabilize it. If it's a mug or something with a handle, I'll hold on to the handle, but otherwise I don't grasp the device. Okay, so opening containers with a voluntary closing device is actually pretty simple. Using that non-skid mat, again, helps to support the object on a work surface without being worried about it skidding or slipping. Sometimes we can do something simple like just stabilize the container against our body, but what I really like to do to actively use my device is hold on to it. So with a voluntary closing device, if I'm using my Adapt, I can open small bottles and jars or tubes or whatever, small containers. But when I have something bigger, I use the Grip 5 because it just has a larger aperture and it can accommodate most of those larger sized jars. I can also use Dicem on the cover in my hand to help open the jar.
Improve the friction.
Exactly. So it helps to save my intact hand. It's one of those preventive, protective techniques that I like to use to protect my intact anatomy while still using my prosthesis efficiently. I'll confess, another thing I like to use is an electric can opener. I avoid the repetitive, resistive action of a key can opener just because I can. It's not one of those things I choose to spend my energy on.
Well, and depending on the shape of the can openers, manual ones come in lots of different handle styles, and some are easier to be able to hold with a prosthesis and others. Some are very difficult. If it's an all metal handle, it can be pretty slippery. It's hard to get that clasping kind of action.
Exactly. So it's just so much of a challenge. Plus, it's so repetitive to my thumb, and my hand has so much overuse, I want to protect it. With a voluntary opening device, if it's a can, I do still go for the electric can opener, but I tend to set it up in a similar fashion. Unfortunately, with a voluntary opening hook, I do have to hold it against my body a lot more frequently to stabilize the object because I can't open up the split hook wide enough to open very many jars.
And its shape it's more like scissors. It has a tendency it doesn't handle cylindrical objects as well.
It doesn't, well, they slide in it or they rotate, so then you're just spinning the object. One trick you can try is to actually wrap the dicem around the jar so that it tends to slip less, and then use another piece of the dicem to open the jar around the top. So those are my tricks for those. Folding laundry with a voluntary closing device is really pretty simple. I try to use a work surface because it helps to support whatever it is I'm folding, and I can make nice neat piles as I'm folding it. I tend to place the object on the surface and use my hand and the prosthesis to pinch the corners together, match them, and then fold them in half. And then I just repeat that folding process until I have the object the size that I want.
And one of the things I find too is with the voluntary closing, it's just a natural reach and grab. You can reach and grab, fold, let go. With a split hook, you've got to consciously open, let it grab. It just adds a little bit more, a little different level of interference to the spontaneous reaching and grasping that I experience with like a grip 5 or something.
Exactly, exactly. One trick that I employ when I am folding any linens, so pillowcases, sheets, anything like that that's going to go on my bed linens, I'll fold them inside out, which I know sounds crazy because you're looking at the seams and the tags when you have it ultimately all folded. But when you go to put those items on your bed, all you have to do is unfold them because they're inside out. So they're easy to position.
Proper side down.
Proper side down, exactly. They just work out to be more efficient when I'm going to go through the task of making the bed. Same thing with pillowcases. The pillowcases are inside out. I slide my hand inside the pillowcase, grab it at the corner and grab a corner of the pillow, and then I use my prosthesis to shake it down or pull it down.
You don't have to be a prosthetics user to take advantage of this tip, Dave.
I know, that's a good one, right? Folding laundry with a voluntary opening device is very similar, but as Bob already pointed out, it's a little more work. One of the tricks I use to combat that is rather than pinching the corners once I have them matched and folded, I tend to just slide the hook inside the fold part so that I'm creating a tension, but I don't have to actually pinch it again. And then I can match the corners. And then I just orient the object so that the hook is always in the fold. The next task is a little awkward, and that is managing long-handled tools like a broom or a rake. And it's great with a voluntary closing device because I can just run the shaft of the tool, the handle of the tool, through my device. If it's narrow enough, I can just Sherlock it closed if I am going to be going around corners and whatnot. But I can use this area right here that I refer to as the web space of my Adept, and I can just use that to help support it while I'm sweeping.
Exactly.
So I usually
It
have...
handles cylindrical objects very well.
Yeah, it does.
Like that.
And I usually keep the prosthesis side at the top. So you talked during the sports and recreation devices about
Top handling and shaft handling.
Exactly. So I use my left hand on the lower part to control the broom, and the upper just kind of
And I'll
guides
just
it.
reverse that myself. Sometimes I'll start one way, I'll get a little fatigued if I'm doing a lot of brooming, and then I'll just switch hands. And that relates to like an activity specific thing like paddle boarding. paddleboarding, people are paddling on one side and then they're paddling on the other to
Right.
maintain their angle and stability in the water. So
Exactly.
having the option to be able to do both pretty easily just facilitates the activity.
So this is using the voluntary opening device, and I admit I struggle a little more with the voluntary opening device to complete this test because I can't grab it as well. And the aperture formed by the kind of the triangle of the hooks at the base where the elastic band is a little smaller. So it's just a little harder to manage. Plus, oftentimes when I'm using a broom, by virtue of the excursion and extending my arms to reach and move it forward, it opens and closes
Yeah,
the
you relax.
hook
You
ties.
relax it, and the object slides out.
Exactly.
You lose control over the shaft of the broom or whatever it might be.
Exactly. So I find I have less control. Now, a way around that would be to actually set the broom in there and co-band around the hook to keep it in there. It's an annoyance, but it does allow us to complete the task independently. Okay, we talked a little earlier about the grocery cart and how helpful it is to have a prosthesis.
Absolutely.
So when I'm wearing the voluntary closing device, and we can apply this concept not just to the grocery cart, but to a baby carriage, a stroller, any kind of lawnmower or lawn device, a wheelbarrow even. So this is one of those kinds of tips or tricks that is applicable to multiple kinds of tools. One of the things you can do is have a piece of pipe insulation or tubing and put it on that railing or on the handles because it will help to keep you from sliding off of it if you're having trouble managing your control. I tend to just, when I'm in the grocery store, I turn my device this way and I hook this part of the terminal device on the railing, close it shut, and I'm steering away. That's how I tend to do it. Sometimes you can use your body a little bit to help propel it, especially when the cart starts to get full and is a little heavier. Again, with the voluntary opening, there's a little bit of slippage. I tend to use the hook tines this way and just wedge it in because I find when I'm using it this way, it just feels awkward with a voluntary closing device. But you can try it both ways and see what works for you. Here's a trick where applying the pipe insulation to that handle on any of those devices can be incredibly helpful. Okay, using a cell phone is our next task. So how do we do that? Well, sometimes we can just place the phone on a mat and use a kickstand to help with it. My cell phone is in a case. So, and I've had there's a product called the Fly Grip, and that has a kickstand on it. But you can oftentimes use the cover to just as kind of a kickstand in multiple ways. This one's kind of floppy and old, but that's one way, and you can use it against another surface as well.
The covers are nice, just gives you more surface area you can interact with and grasp onto while you're dialing or whatever you might be doing with your phone.
Exactly. I tend to like to hold the device itself in my prosthesis, and that way I can use my hand to actuate the buttons.
Yeah,
and do
texting
what I
or
need
whatever
to
you
do.
might be doing.
With the voluntary opening device, I actually use very similar circumstances, very similar techniques. I'll use my hand to activate it, but I use the split hook to just hold onto the device. I tend to have a little harder time managing my grip on that because the phone can be a little heavy and floppy. So it's just not, for me, it's not a device I tend to use that much. Operating a keyboard is not that hard. I have a kind of a large hand, so my hand kind of spans the keyboard pretty well. But to access those keys on the right side of my keyboard, I often take a pencil. You'll see this in the video. I always have pencils, and pencils are a lot cheaper than the stylus. The other thing about it is that the stylus is often very small. It's narrow and it's slippery. So I find that a pencil works really well. I rest it so that it's resting on that bridge of the web space. Eraser side down, and the eraser is rubber, so it has a little bit of friction to it, and I can use it to address some of those larger keys on the right-hand side. Or if I have to do like Control-Alt-Delete or something like that, where I have to operate multiple keys simultaneously, typically one of them is going to be on the right side of the keyboard, and that pencil idea comes in pretty handy. With voluntary opening, I use a similar idea. I just hold the pencil a little differently. Hold it very similar to the way I hold a fork in that split hook device, where I'm using that thumb piece.
You brace it against the thumb element of the
to leverage.
split hook.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just use it that way. But again, the same tips and tricks apply.
For myself, I use the thumb a lot on the keyboard. I'm able to, I use it mostly for uppercase. I'm using, primarily using the keyboard one-handed, but I can use a stylus, a pencil, things like that.
Okay.
Or I use the end of the thumb to hit the shift to get the uppercase, like a little bit more two-handed.
In closing, please consider these diverse strategies and solutions. For some activities we haven't talked about, there are other tricks. Like when you're tying your shoes, you can actually wind the laces around your terminal device, and that will help you to have a little more stability. And don't be afraid to use other parts of your body to help assist you to complete tasks. Be sure to use the environment to help support, position, and even stabilize. And let your terminal device features do the same. Let them work to your advantage. Don't be afraid to use items like Dysum, Coban, even a damp face cloth to help secure or support objects. And another thing is you can use objects for things other than what they're intended, like the pizza knife. We don't have to use it for just pizza. And there are a host of other kinds of tools that you can use. So at this point, we just want to thank you for listening, and we ask you to stay tuned to our channel, and feel free to send us any ideas that you might have for topics or other tasks that you'd like to learn to do or would like us to address.
Take care. Bye-bye.